Hello and welcome to another edition of American Racing Snobs. Eric Morse alongside Tony Rizzuti as we get ready for, yes, I'm going to say it, the last epic racing weekend of the season, Tony. We got the Grand Prix of Japan at the mighty Suzuka circuit. We've got IMSA Petite LeMans. We've got the Bathurst 1000. I am geeked up. Let's go racing. It's going to be awesome.
It is going to be awesome. It's going to be awesome. A weekend. I think the other two events are in decent shape, but I'm a little bit concerned about our Grand Prix. Supposedly a super typhoon. I guess that's like a major hurricane. Typhoon. No, it's a super typhoon. Headed that direction Friday, Saturday. We'll see if it interrupts the Grand Prix itself. It's not the first time we've had a typhoon interrupt the racing at Suzuka. It was a few years ago that one came through there and got everything all wet.
It doesn't always rain in Japan, but when it does, it really freaking
They don't
rains.
mess around, do they?
Yeah, it was a couple of years back that weekend, obviously marred by the awful crash of Jules Bianchi that ultimately led to the implementation of the virtual safety car. That was when they refused to move the race up and actually ran the race in appalling conditions, had to end it early after that terrible crash. I believe also maybe in the early 2000s, maybe like 2004, 2005, a similar situation happened where a typhoon washed out Friday and Saturday, and they actually moved qualifying to Sunday morning. A lot of people think that's what might happen this weekend because this isn't IndyCar, this isn't NASCAR where you just line them up by the rule book. Qualifying is a major part of the F1 weekend. You can't have a race without qualifying. It's looking like initially the forecasts were saying Sunday could be disastrous, but now it's looking like it's going to arrive a day early. Friday, a little dodgy. Saturday looks like an absolute washout. Chances of sustained winds of over 100 miles an hour with a direct hit to the circuit. Now, even if Sunday's weather is better, can they use the racetrack if it's been hit by a super typhoon with wind gusts of up to 140 miles per hour is what's predicted right now by the weather services. This could get real messy, Tony.
Yeah, and as we've learned in other series, it's not always just what's happening at the racetrack, but what's happening around the area of the racetrack, because anytime you put on a big event and you're bringing in that many people, you're talking about extra police, extra security, traffic. If all those people are out having to help other people or keep things normal in a town, obviously they can't also be at the racetrack. So yeah, let's cross our fingers, right? Let's hopefully we get to just get a little bit wet maybe one day early, but nothing too bad, and we can get racing, because this is one of those races that I think everybody kind of looks forward to. This is such an ultimate Formula One track. It has such great flow. It has super high speeds. It has super twisty S's and tight corners and hairpins. It's the only track that actually crosses back over itself. So you're actually going under a bridge and then over the circuit on a bridge.
It's clockwise and anti-clockwise. It's the only circuit that does that.
It's amazing. It's the first track typically when I open up a video game
just thinking the same thing
that I run on. Now, it's not the first I look at. I always look to see how they do Monaco, but the one I physically get out there and want to race on is always Suzuka. That's the one that tells me, is this going to be a good game? Are the physics good? Does it look good? I mean, we're geeking out on video games here, but I think Suzuka really has that feel to race fans as such a racy racetrack.
It's got everything. It's got the best Turn 1 in Formula One. I was toss-up between that and maybe Catalunya, but Hobbs convinced me. We were talking about it. David Hobbs, when we were hanging out with him a couple months ago, said that Suzuka is hands down the best Turn 1 in F1. I've got to agree with him. You've got the Degner curves. They're both gut-check right-handers coming out of that flowing S section. You've got spoon curve, which is so difficult. How many world champions have you seen throw it in the barriers there in practice and qualifying? I was thinking Alonso, Schumacher, Vettel. We've all seen them have problems there because the launch onto that long straightaway is so important, and it's like a triple apex left-hander, and then that all leads to the 130R, which to me is one of the best corners of all of F1. It's almost flat, depending on the downforce package you have or anything like that. That hard left-hander that leads to the chicane past the Ferris wheel. I mean, we've only been coming there since the late 80s, but it feels like an original it was an instant classic when it joined F1 because of the history. The Senna-Prost rivalry was in the first couple rounds that they ever hosted there. It's just one of those dates that you circle. I really hope that the weather cooperates, which leads me to my next question. If we do race, what's going to happen, Tony?
Yeah, that's the big question, isn't it? This is probably the full chance to see where exactly is Ferrari compared to Mercedes. We expected them to be good at Spa. We expected them to be good at Monza. We did not expect them to be good at Singapore, and they were. They were good in Russia and screwed up their strategy and had a car failure. If we come here, which, again, has a little bit of everything, I expect the Ferrari to be super fast down the front stretch. I feel like they'll be good enough to get through turn one. I think they'll struggle on the next part of the middle circuit of this track. I think is going to be a tough thing for Ferrari, but the first and second segments I think are going to be really good. So this is going to be, to me, another true test as to where Ferrari's at. Now, Toto Wolff has come out and admitted that, hey, look, we kind of started working on 2020 stuff. We had such a huge lead.
It was luxury to have.
Yeah, it was ridiculous. We kind of started working on that. Ferrari kind of went all in on this car, and guess what? Second half of the season, these are Toto's words. They've been better than us.
It's also Toto's world.
What did I say? Toto's words. I get so excited. I'm so passionate about Formula One. I get excited sometimes. So even he's admitted that Ferrari kind of has the advantage on Mercedes right now, but it'll be interesting to, and Ferrari's come back and said, we're working on 20. If we get this right, we'll get 2020 right. Like, it's all tied in, and we've talked about that before. The rule changes that might happen for next year aren't dramatic. We're looking at pretty much same style of car, same style of wing. It's going to be little tweaks, so if you get it right here, you're probably going to be pretty good. So it's going to be interesting to see, but I've read that Mercedes is bringing minor upgrades. They've gotten serious again, and they're putting some upgrades on the car that they think will get them a little bit closer to where Ferrari's at. It's Honda's home race for Red Bull, so where's that engine going to be? They're saying come next year, they're going to be able to compete with those two cars on a regular basis. So, yeah, this is so much kind of a known and an unknown thing in my world, I think.
In recent years, Suzuka has been Toto's world. They have won every race there in the turbo hybrid era.
See, I wasn't wrong.
That's 5 in a row, same as they have at Russia, although they probably shouldn't have continued that streak based on Ferrari's pace in the last Grand Prix there. However, Lewis Hamilton, a winner in 2014 and 15, Nico Rosberg in 16, and then Lewis back-to-back the last 2 years. So Lewis has won 4 of the last 5. But right before that, Sebastian Vettel was on a tear, winning 4 of 5 in the Red Bull. Bob Varsha always used to say there are different horses for different courses, and he always penciled Suzuka as a Sebastian Vettel track. Lately, it's been a Lewis Hamilton track, and Hamilton says we could have a 3-team fight for the victory. This is what we've been jonesing for the last several years. I think this is going to be wide open, assuming we get to race and assuming that race is in the dry. I think we're going to see a real interesting battle with at least 4 or 5 guys with a shot to make something happen and stand on the top step of that podium. By the way, you were talking about Ferrari and their surge. You know when the last time they won Suzuka was? The last year Michael Schumacher won a title.
Wow.
2004 was the last Ferrari. It's been dominated by McLaren, Red Bull, and lately Mercedes with just one Renault interloper, Fernando Alonso, back in 2006.
Well, I think the big look, the second half of the season's been way better than the first. It's been way more competitive. There's been so many great storylines coming out of it. There's been big news. It's been fun. The second half of the season's what we've wanted. I think if we get a dry race, which I think, look, we're not – it's hard to predict weather over here, let alone halfway around the world or almost fully around the world. I think if it's wet, this is Lewis's race to lose. I just think he's so good.
Max.
Max
put on a masterclass in Germany. We thought it was going to be Lewis versus Max in the wet in Germany, and Max proved to be the driver who made the least costly mistakes.
I'm just not sure they have the horsepower for this type of track. I think they're getting closer.
They got the Suzuka special wound up. Come on.
I don't know. I think that'd be great if it was. I think that'd be a tremendous battle. But I think if
their mind if a Honda won in Suzuka. I'm trying to think of the last time a Honda was victorious in their home country. I think you got to go back to, I don't think it was Senna, maybe Gerhard Berger in the McLaren back in the early 90s before they changed power plants. It was a McLaren, but I think if we look it up, it looks like it was Gerhard Berger. Thank you, racingreference.info, the best website ever. I am very concerned about the aftermath of this storm, and like you said, the local infrastructure. I've been at races where the weather was fine and we still had to postpone a day or two, and that's something that F1 doesn't generally do.
No.
I've seen them halt races midway and say, we're not going to resume this. We're only giving out half points. I think that most recently happened in the 2009 season. It was either Malaysia or China, something like that, where they had to stop the race and they were short of the distance where they had decided it would be considered an official race. So we'll see how they handle that. Hopefully everyone stays safe. I know Japan's had their share of natural disasters in recent years. So hopefully the super typhoon not only spares our friends in Japan, but also spares our beloved Japanese Grand Prix here coming up. So we'll keep an eye on that. Some other things going on, Tony. Well, the 2020 calendar is confirmed.
Yeah, I saw that, and I think somebody's already booked a trip, haven't they?
Yeah, my Airbnb is confirmed for Montreal.
By the way, I thought that was an offer, and I'm like, wow, you got extra no, mine's full. And I'm like, wait a second.
We got a big family trip going for my niece's
you were
high school
offering.
Graduation is the plan. I still have to get out of work, so we'll see how
we can make that happen.
Yeah, we'll work on that. But it is 22 races long as we are now adding Zandvoort and the street course of Vietnam, which looks truly epic, by the way. It looks like Baku 2.0. That is the longest ever schedule in Formula One history. Max Verstappen says that this travel schedule will lead to divorces throughout the paddock among crew members, mechanics.
Welcome to the NASCAR
reps.
world.
Yeah. Those flights are a lot easier in the NASCAR
They
world.
are, but it's still 39 weekends. And then if you think back, the current NASCAR schedule is a little bit better, not to NASCAR out people and make them drive away, but back in the mid-'90s, late 90s, early 2000s, when you were allowed to test too, those crew guys weren't ever home.
Well, F1 was like that too. Remember, Ferrari built their own test track, and they would every day be running with Luca Badoer just pounding around that circuit on the outskirts of Maranello. That's one of the reasons Michael Schumacher had such a dominant car to work with, was there was no limit on how much testing you could do, and really wind tunnel, track time, throw money at it. That's going to buy speed. So that's one of the concerns with this 22-race calendar. Yeah. It's also going to wreak havoc with the engine limit rule.
They're going to have to figure something out there.
Everyone's in the same sandbox, though, so it's going to come out in the wash eventually. You might have
we're just going to have tons of grid penalties all year, which kind of defeats
about
the
changing
purpose.
The grid penalty thing for next year has been discussed by Liberty and the FOM about ways to mess with that. They're also talking about qualifying heat races, all kinds of things like that. They're trying to make the Sunday show better, which really I just hope that the rules package for 2021 makes the Sunday show better. You need two things. You need to be able to follow and pass somebody naturally without this dirty air ruining your tires, and you need parity among the teams. Because right now, there's such a huge gap between the big three and the rest of them. It's becoming too predictable. Even in this exciting season we've had, we can be better. I feel like this is a gimmick trying to fix that. So hopefully they won't have to do anything too drastic, because a Saturday at a Formula One track is as near as perfect entertainment, I think, as you can get right now, with that final shakedown, everybody throwing what they have at it, and then the dramatic 1-hour qualifying session. I love it. Don't change it, please.
I know in previous podcasts we had talked about, in fact, you brought it up, the amount of money at stake for these teams that are in the midfield as to whether they finish 4th, 5th, 6th, wherever they finish in points. Haas coming out this week with Günther Steiner saying, I'm going to have to put on my thinking cap to figure out what we're going to do in 2020 with the money that we have lost this year compared to the runs they've had in the past.
They're going to be 9th.
Yeah,
unless something drastic happens, they're going to beat Williams.
They don't have that rich energy money, which turned out to be a complete disaster.
Rich Energy didn't have that rich energy
Yeah, they were
money.
probably never getting it anyway, but you budget as if you hope it is, or you'd have never put them on the car. He came out this week, said, look, we at least have Haas automation on the side of the car that can pick up some of the loss. Well, they don't want to pick up the whole thing, so Haas already kind of on the back foot going into next year, knowing they probably don't have the amount of money they need to compete where they want to. He mentioned the two different chassis that they were trying to develop at one point in time to see which was better, and then the two bozos of drivers kept wrecking each other, so they learned nothing. Was a complete waste of money. They're back with the original car with just some tweaks from Australia at the beginning of the year. I mean, this is one of those years. I looked at my inbox the other day on my email, and I have 2019 deleted messages in my deleted folder, and I was thinking to myself, I bet Gunter Steiner would like to hit delete on 2019.
It has been a lost season. They've been so spoiled with the success that they've had being a contender from the very beginning for the top of the midfield.
Well, we all thought they had the new modern model for running Formula One. Don't do anything yourself. Go out and find vendors and just make it work.
Well, as long as those parts play well together, It's all fine. But as soon as you get in a situation like you've seen this year where, this wing concept doesn't do well with the side pod concept, and the diffuser's not getting what it needs, and the engine's not cooling the way, and the tires aren't activating, how do you fix that? Because that's such a multifaceted problem. It's a nightmare over there, and hopefully this isn't the start of a spiral.
Well,
like you saw at Williams that led to them being literally the slowest F1 car by a wide margin coming into this season and not being able to do much to impact that gap.
Well, I mean, when you look at 2021, they're going to put the bigger wheels on it, which Pirelli's had great tests. They're willing to nominate the compound they have to go with that wheel. They feel like they know enough stuff that thing can start moving forward. Lewis Hamilton's looked at the dirty air data. He's looked at some of the other stuff and says, yeah, this looks really good. I know a lot of the teams have been arguing over what the engine should be and some of those rules, but Romain Grosjean came out and he said, according to the information they're receiving, you're going to have an even harder time getting the tires to work on the bigger wheel because it's just going to change the stress on it. And while other people are saying, no, this is going to make it better, their data is showing that it's not. So this could be a long-term problem from Haas. And that starts to make you wonder a little bit about those rumors about looking for maybe Saudi Arabian interest in the team. And should we take a Grand Prix there? Take the political side out of it, but Haas is in a weird situation right now. This could be like you mentioned, you don't want it to turn into what's happened with Williams. Hopefully it won't, but there's writing on the wall that said it could be. It could turn into something like that for them.
This is a turning point for Haas. They really need to get it together for next year and have a car that works, or else that's another lost season if you can't recoup what you learned or what they hopefully learned in 2019 by finishing 9th in the Constructors' Championship. You can't do that too many times in a row before the entire business model falls apart. Hell, Mercedes F1 is barely profitable. I think I'm going to have these numbers slightly wrong, but I think I read that they spent $329 million to make $340-something million. Their profit was like $13 million, which isn't small numbers, but you think about a team that is the most dominant, up there with Ferrari from the early 2000s and the McLarens of the late 80s and the Williams of the early 90s, one of the 4 or 5 most dominant cars in F1 history, and their margins for profit of how much they're spending versus how much they're making is relatively small.
Yeah, it's a huge risk for them. And before we start to get the messages and the emails, but you guys are you hate Haas. I want Haas to succeed. I really do. I like Gene. I had a chance to talk to him and Gunter when they announced the deal over in Kannapolis, North Carolina at the F1 shop that sits empty. I want them to succeed. I'm not a fan of Romain Grosjean. I like Kevin Magnussen, but I think I've seen enough out of both of them where I would have liked to have seen them maybe go another direction. I don't know what that direction is. Maybe Hulkenberg in another new location gets renewed life. They came out this week, Hulkenberg's people came out and said it had nothing to do with money. It wasn't a salary deal. It was the fact that they never gave Hulkenberg the idea that they could deliver the type of performance that he's looking for at this stage of his career. And that's why the thing never went any further than it did. Whether that's the truth or not, I don't know. But I want to be on record as saying I would love to see Haas succeed. I was very excited for them in year one. I hate seeing people do the same thing over and over. And I know the easiest answer in a lot of areas is just fire everybody and start over. And I know you can't do that either, but this year to me just felt like one of those years where you've seen enough. It's time to go a different direction. They're choosing not to. I hope it works for them. If it does, I'll be the first person to say I was wrong, and I'm pulling for them. So just before all those come flooding in that you hate Haas, I don't hate Haas. I'm going to be rooting for Haas when I'm there in Austin. If Gunter walked in the door right now, I'd be like a kid at Christmas. I'd be excited to see him and talk to him. But I got to call it the way I see it right now, much like I did with Sebastian Vettel, and that's kind of where I am on the Haas team.
We'll see what they're able to do. Looking further into the pipeline, Tony, have you heard of Naoki Yamamoto?
I know that he's getting a shot with Toro Rosso. Is it Toro Rosso?
Yep.
Yeah, this weekend?
He'll be in for Pierre Gasly in FP1, weather permitting. If you haven't heard of him, he is not related to former F1 driver Sakon Yamamoto, formerly of HRT. But he is the defending Super Formula champion in Japan, and he comes with Honda backing. This is exciting because he is the first Japanese driver to take place in a session in F1 since Kamui Kobayashi, back when he raced for Caterham in 2014, and he's the first Japanese native to drive a Honda-powered car since Takuma Sato with Super Aguri back in 2008. So this is really exciting to get him in front of the home crowd.
Yeah, I hope that's a fun practice. Again, I hope they get the practice. You know, that'd be so disappointing that you're set up to do this and then wash out Friday, wash out Saturday, and never gets a chance. But excited for that.
By the way, those weekends with the washout on Friday and Saturday sometimes lead to the most exciting Grand Prix.
Absolutely.
It was Austin a couple years ago where they had no practice, and the race was a total crapshoot. No one knew what the tire life was. No one knew what the best strategy to do. They didn't have the data to plug into the computer, so you had to go on gut feeling and driver talent. I love those.
There's lots of people that think that the amount of practice in all of the racing series actually hampers the competitiveness of the series.
Well, you're looking for a balance because you want to put on a spectacle for the weekend. If you're going to travel, especially if you're getting on a plane to go to a Grand Prix, you want to see as much running as you possibly can, not just F1 but other series as well. But it can be really frustrating if you want to see FP1, FP2, and you don't get to see that for one reason or another, especially if it's weather or, you know, even worse, if people are just, oh, well, the track conditions aren't optimal. We're gonna protect our tires. I'm glad that Formula One has taken steps to give the teams the resources they need to make running worthwhile. You know, you used to see cars take long breaks in qualifying because we don't want to hurt these tires because we need these tires for the race. Well, I'll tell you what, let's change the rules. We'll give you an extra set if you make it into Q3 because we want to put on a spectacle. So it's drawing that line of making the weekend worthwhile versus making the race worthwhile. And you're never going to get it completely perfect every weekend. So anytime you get a chance to mix that up, it could be exciting, but hopefully it doesn't come at the expense of Naoki Yamamoto making his Formula One FP1 debut for Toro Rosso this weekend. I do want to get to our picks for this weekend, but first we had some listener feedback that we want to touch base on.
The first question we had was from our buddy Gary, who said he listened to the Russian Grand Prix post-race podcast, and he says, I need that audio on Eric's last year's prediction that Charles Leclerc would be doing what he's done so far this year.
I wish we had a show last year because I have been wearing people out, the people that I watch F1 with, my wife, my brother-in-law, some of my friends who live in town when we get together, some of the guys on my hockey team, and I've been talking up Charles Leclerc since he was in Formula 2. He is truly a unique talent coming up through the junior formula, and I don't have proof, is what I'm trying to say. I could get a testimonial from others, but I don't think that's going to fly. That's not going to be very entertaining radio. So I'm sorry, Gary. I don't have proof. You're going to have to take my word for it. And I have made plenty of wrong predictions as well. I don't want to make it seem like I'm the Nostradamus of F1. I was totally opposed to Lewis Hamilton going to Mercedes in 2012. It was just about this time 7 years ago that he made that announcement. It came up on my Facebook time hop going back there, and I had all these posts going, why would you go to the slower car? And actually, one of my friends from the UK that I met at LeMans accurately predicted that Lewis would go on a tear as soon as they got the turbo hybrid engines in 2014. I don't think any of us expected it to last this long. But he also, no one's perfect because he also predicted that Davide Valsecchi would be a future Ferrari driver. He never actually made the F1 grid, so we're all flawed.
Gary, thanks for the comment. Sean Olmstead also reached out and said maybe a bonus episode about the timeline of when McLaren's F1 woes started to their latest news. He thinks that'd be a good episode.
If you want to, Tony, I've kind of read up on this, and I had a pretty good idea, but I've been looking through the numbers this morning thinking about this. I think we could briefly surmise that if you want to go down that rabbit hole just a little bit, since we don't have a race to review this week.
Why don't let's make our picks. We'll take a break, and then we come back. We'll answer Sean's question about the McLaren. All right, so this is going to be the wild card pick of the year, right? We have no idea if there even is going to be a race. We're going to cross our fingers and hope and pray for everybody's safety there and that we do get a race. So, Eric, I'm going to let you go first. Not knowing anything, who do you like to win the Japanese Grand Prix?
I think it's a battle royale that we've all been waiting for. For years, I've been waiting for Lewis Hamilton versus Sebastian Vettel. I think we finally get our wheel-to-wheel race, red car versus silver car. And I think the momentum is in Ferrari's corner. I'm going car number 5, Sebastian Vettel, to win in Suzuka.
Wow. Where's Charles Leclerc? I thought you were high on Charles Leclerc. I thought you knew he was going to be better than Sebastian Vettel, yet you just took Vettel.
I took Vettel because, as Mr. Varsha once told me, different horses for different courses. I think there's something magical about Vettel in Suzuka, not to say that there isn't with Hamilton. That's why I think it's those two. I'm looking at just 2 4-time winners of the Japanese Grand Prix going wheel to wheel to see who can get up to that next echelon that only Michael Schumacher stands on in Japan as the winningest driver. I think either of them have a good shot. I don't think that Leclerc's a bad pick either, but if there are 4 drivers, maybe even 5 if you include Bottas, who could fight for the win, I just picked 2 that I think are going to go wheel-to-wheel, and my gut tells me the Ferrari's going to win out on this particular occasion.
You're killing me here, Smalls, because I was going to go with Vettel as well. And I won't go with Leclerc because that will just mean doom for Ferrari. So that means I'm going to pick Lewis Hamilton, right? No, you convinced me. I'm going for the Super Typhoon, Super Japanese result. For all the doom and gloom that the Typhoon's going to bring, Max Verstappen's going to bring joy to the people who love their Honda power plant. I will go with Max Verstappen in a horrible rainstorm to win the Japanese Grand Prix.
I like it.
I don't, but that's what I'm going with.
You gave me first dibs, so I'll let you take midfield.
Man, midfield, right? This is going to be another one of those toss-ups. So it's going to be somebody, I'm predicting a rain race, so it's going to have to be somebody who's pretty decent in the rain. And when you get back to the midfield, it gets a little sketchy with my expertise on who are guys that can really maneuver a car well in the rain. Man, thinking back to Germany and thinking who could hold on and who couldn't. You know who had a pretty nice run? Man, I just can't think of. Like, I want to go Danny Rick here, and I just still have a hard time of having him as a midfield guy. But I'm going to go with Danny Ricciardo as my midfield MVP, although it's hard for me to put him in the midfield, even though that's technically where Renault is.
That's where that car definitely is midfield worthy. And I do think that he's probably the most talented driver racing in the midfield right now. We'll see if he gets a chance to show it. Yeah, I'm leaning towards Kimi Räikkönen.
Yep.
He had a strong race here a couple times in the past. Famously passed Fernando Alonso on the last lap when he was racing for McLaren. I think that was maybe 05. I think that Kimi Räikkönen, especially with that slippery Alfa Romeo, might be really good on the straights there. We'll see if Kimi Räikkönen can bring home some good points for the Alfa as my midfield MVP.
We've kind of done away with the bogey because it doesn't really work anymore because it's kind of who you think's going to win if the other guy doesn't win, and we kind of usually explain that when we pick our winner. How about we do this, not to throw bad luck on people, but who are you concerned about this weekend, Eric? Who do you think, given what you kind of think's going to happen, might be in a little bit of trouble this week?
Unlike you, I think it's going to be a dry race if we race. I think it's going to clear up by Sunday. I'm not sure.
We kind of got to throw the Williams guys out because they're going to be in the back regardless.
Yeah, they're kind of in a world of pain every single weekend. I think the person that we need to see something from is probably Nico Hülkenberg.
Yep.
Danny Rick is a really good measuring stick, and if he's going to enjoy his potential post-F1 career, I think going out on a high note is very important to raise his stock, whether that's in Formula E, World Endurance Championship. He's been linked to DTM, the German touring car series. I think that he's a driver who's had a very interesting career in F1, and I'd like to see him step up and go out on a high note if this is, in fact, the end for Nico, at least in the short term in his F1 career.
I think Pierre Gasly needs to have another good race. I think the move back, while not ideal for him in his career, has at least taken some weight off his shoulder, and he seems more like who we kind of expected him to be. But I'm going to go out and say, I mean, it's got to be one of the Haas guys. They've got to find something. They got to have at least a little bit of light on the tunnel. I think Magnussen's the better of the two drivers, but I think Grosjean's more the leader of that team. So I'm going to go out and say Romain Grosjean could be in a little bit of trouble here. He's a guy who needs to have a good run in the race. All right, those are our picks. Let's just go over our winners again. Eric likes Sebastian Vettel in a wheel-to-wheel dry race. I like Max Verstappen in a wet, very wet, and treacherous race. I like Ricardo for my midfield. He likes Kimi Räikkönen. I think Romain Grosjean needs to have a good race, and he thinks this would be a chance for Nico Hülkenberg to do something really nice. Needs a good race as well. All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to answer Sean's question about just when did these McLaren woes happen up until now, and then we'll look at some of the other great racing coming up in the Morse Code Report. You've heard it. We've got supercars. We've got Petite LeMans. We got everybody in action, and we'll get to all of it right after this.
Hi, I'm Sarah McLaren. There's a real problem facing F1 racing fans in America these days. Spoilers. With race times ranging between 1 and 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, many people have to DVR their F1 races because they have jobs, weekend lives, or enjoy sleep, and are not fortunate enough to be up before God's hour to watch in real time. Please stop posting spoilers. Your donation will cost you $0. That's less than the cost of your next breath. Won't you help out your fellow fan? Please put your phone down right now and stop posting spoilers. Thank you.
Here's your chance to win a set of your very own Hercules tires. Go to HerculesTires.com/MRN. Simply register, and each month we'll give away one set of tires. Hercules Tires has the value, selection, and industry-leading mileage coverage to get you wherever you need to go, no matter where the road takes you. Register now for your chance to win a set of Hercules tires at HerculesTires.com/MRN. Hercules Tires. Ride on our street.
Welcome back to American Racing Snobs. I am Tony Rizzuti. I'm sitting alongside Eric Morse. Actually, he's on the other side of the glass. Eric, big weekend of racing. We'll get to all that in a little bit. But back to Sean's question. And as always, if you want to send us a message, at Racing Snobs is where we're at on Twitter. We see all of your messages. You can also send us a message on the Motor Racing Network Facebook page. That's where you can watch and listen to the show there. You can comment. Also, if you want to leave us a review on either Apple Podcasts or Spotify, we read those as well. But basically, Sean's question to you, Eric, was, what is the timeline from when McLaren's woes started to where they are right now with the latest news that they're going to switch back to Mercedes power plants moving forward?
I want to go back to 1998. That is the last time McLaren won a constructor's title. Now, they did win a Drivers' World Championship in 2008. I was with Lewis Hamilton. However, Heikki Kovalainen could not take enough points off of the Ferraris of both Kimi Räikkönen and Felipe Massa, and Ferrari got the 2008 Constructors' Championship. It's like any spiraling issue in F1, it's something that happens gradually, but there are a couple major landmarks that I want to highlight just real quick without going too far down the rabbit hole. In 2007, McLaren was on top of the world. They had two-time defending F1 champion left Renault, that's Fernando Alonso, moving to McLaren. Lewis Hamilton was a rookie. It's very rare you see a rookie get a chance to win races, but Lewis Hamilton came out right away and started his career with, 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 straight podiums to begin his career.
Wow.
And he was giving Alonso all he could handle. that sowed some discord. Hamilton broke a truce in qualifying when Alonso was supposed to get a tow, and Hamilton decided not to. Then Alonso blocked him in at Hungary, and that was pretty much the divorce was sealed at that point in terms of their drivers. But the major thing that happened to me in 2007 was when that whole spying controversy where documents from Ferrari's secret technical information center were found to be in possession of McLaren. They had hired someone who had recently left Ferrari, joined McLaren, and brought sensitive information with him. I believe Alonso, if I have my facts straight, because I was still just getting into F1 again when this was all going down, I believe Alonso had a role in bringing this to light with the team he was driving for because he was so unhappy with how things were going with Hamilton. They were excluded from that championship and fined $100 million.
Wow.
Alonso leaves. Lewis Hamilton goes on to achieve some success, but that was step one and what starts to go down. Step two to me was in 2009 when Lewis Hamilton was disqualified from the Australian Grand Prix for overtaking under a safety car. This was the downfall of Ron Dennis. Ron Dennis was the guy who brought McLaren back to glory in the Alain Prost, Ayrton Senna days. There was team radio that they had hidden from the stewards about Lewis. Basically, Lewis was confused and wasn't sure where he was supposed to be. The team told him to do one thing. He overtook, I think it was Robert Kubica under the safety car, and then the team denied what they had told him. And when it came to light that they had lied about what they were doing on the pit wall, I don't think this had anything to do with Lewis as a driver, Ron Dennis resigned, and the team became Martin Whitmarsh's. You look at their finishes since then. Able to win races. They plug in Jenson Button, third in constructors, second in constructors. They're good, but they're not great.
Was that the Vodafone car?
Yeah.
The chrome one? Or silver one?
Yeah.
Silver and chrome?
Yeah. The last two, Mercedes-powered, by the way. The last two steps to me were when Lewis Hamilton is looking at his career in 2012. He had won, I think at that point, 2 or 3 races that year, but he decided, because Niki Lauda convinced him of what Mercedes could be. Lauda was the one that recruited Hamilton. Losing Lewis Hamilton, I don't think, can be understated, because if you look at the way their car has fared since Lewis left, his last year they finished third in constructors. Then it's fifth, ninth when they switched to Honda, 6th, 9th, then to Renault, 6th place last year, currently 4th on the rebound. But I think those are the 3 big ones, and then obviously the move to Honda. That was a big risk-reward type thing. They put in all those hard years. What was it, 3 brutal seasons with so many DNFs and so far down on horsepower, and it was the Alonso effect. Fernando, I think, was the reason that the McLaren-Honda divorce happened. Now he's no longer driving an F1, and Honda is winning races again. I think the timing of how they got things with Alonso, not to point fingers at Fernando, but he was involved with 2 of these 4 major steps that I've identified that took McLaren from a world championship contender to now fighting in the midfield. I mean, finishing 9th in constructors 2 of the last 5 years.
That's brutal.
How the mighty have fallen. Now they're trying to dig themselves out of this hole. The finishes immediately improved when they went to Renault, but now looking at this year's finishes, even though McLaren clearly has a good car, being 4th, they're technically head of the midfield right now, you have to wonder what would have happened if they had kept Honda, because right now they are paired with what is probably the weakest motor on the grid. Now, you get the Mercedes power in 2021, there's nowhere to hide. Who knows who's going to have the best engine in 2021? We may not even have turbo hybrids because that's still up for discussion. We know it's going to be a complete rules revolution. But it's been a long road back for McLaren. If they finish 4th, good for them. That's best in the midfield. That's important prize money. They've got continuity in their driver lineup, but it's so strange. It's almost like Mercedes kind of usurped their mojo. You know, you were looking at those silver cars that were so dominant and challenging the Ferraris in the late 2000s, and now it's just the Mercedes. So that's just a short little timeline on how we got to where we are with McLaren. It's just those little steps because nothing happens drastically all at once, with the exception of that Honda change where they were fighting for. It's not like they were winning races, because if you look at the history of podiums, since Lewis Hamilton left McLaren at the end of 2012, they didn't get a single podium in 2013, even though they finished fifth in Constructors. They didn't get a podium. Their last podium was the first race of the turbo hybrid era, because if you remember, they ran Mercedes that 1 year. Mercedes was such a valuable power plant that first year. They were so much quicker than everyone else that if you were Force India or Williams or McLaren, you had a shot at a podium that first year in almost every race because the power plant was so good. And in the opening race, Magnussen finished second, Jenson Button finished third. Opening round of 2014 is the last McLaren podium, so it is a long way back.
I think that's a great breakdown, Eric. Appreciate that. There's so many, you're right. All these different factors kind of led to what we saw, but I think at the heart of it, it really was in my opinion, the turbo hybrid era took a big hit to some teams that just weren't positioned from a global what they were situation. I give you McLaren. Yes, McLaren makes road cars. McLaren didn't make their own engine to run in Formula One. They were going to need somebody else to do that. Meanwhile, you had Mercedes coming in willing to build their own engines. They build engines for 18 billion other vehicles. They have a strong brand with a lot of money. You have Ferrari that's always been Ferrari. They've been on the grid the longest. They build their own engines. They got plenty of money behind them. You look at those brands, then you look at McLaren, who didn't have all that, and Williams, who didn't have all that. They have struggled in the turbo hybrid era because they've had to rely on other people, and they just don't have the resources that the others do. The argument to that would be, well, Red Bull doesn't make any cars and they don't make any engines. No, but what Red Bull had was one of the top engineers and designers of all time in Adrian Newey. They also had massively deep pockets. They had Mercedes-style pockets that they could reach into and spend whatever they wanted to. And that allowed them to pick pocket from different teams, the best people they had. Then you had this global, really cool, fun brand that anybody would want to be related with because they're going to promote you and you're cool and young people love it and you're going to be plastered everywhere, which made people want to drive for them. And they invested in a young development driver program that worked for it. Now it's kind of in a little bit of trouble because Max has been so good, nobody seems to hold up. That's kind of the difference. They got stuck in an era in which they had to rely on other people, and if you make the wrong decision, as McLaren did with Honda, it takes a while to get it back.
Well, it was a big swing and a miss.
Yeah.
You know, your F1 career is defined by a couple of big decisions, and hopefully you're in the position to make those decisions and make the correct decision. You know, Alonso leaving Ferrari when he did. Whoops. Hamilton, we already talked about that. That was genius. Danny Rick to Renault. I think that's going to take a few years to figure out, was that career suicide or was that a stroke of genius or just a meh? It's way too early to tell because Lewis's first year at Mercedes didn't look super fabulous either. I think he only had one race win despite 5 pole positions. This was a big moment for McLaren. They took a chance on Honda. As we're seeing that Honda can build race-winning engines now, it's heartbreaking to think of how much pain they went through and how they're not profiting from that. But all things run their course, so we'll see what the future holds for McLaren. I think they're one of those teams that is really hoping the 2021 season is such a big grid shakeup, kind of like in 2009 where you saw Braun GP and Red Bull vault to the top of the food chain.
There. Yeah, they're with them.
Yeah, there's a lot of teams hoping that this isn't just going to be more of the same silver car, Red Bull. So we'll keep an eye on that.
Great stuff, Sean. And to any of you, if you got something we want to dive a little bit deeper on, we love to do it. Just send us a note. You can tweet us at Racing Snobs or those other ways we told you. And it's now time, because we've talked, there's a lot of good racing besides Formula One this weekend. It's time for the Morse Code Report. Eric?
Well, first thing I want to talk about was we had some great racing last week in Japan.
Yes.
World Endurance Championship at Fuji. where the home team Toyota Gazoo Racing, despite all of the handicaps applied to their car, were still 1-2 in their home race, with Kaz Nakajima, Sebastian Buemi, and newcomer Brendan Hartley taking top honors in car number 8.
Brendan Hartley.
I love Brendan Hartley. That kid is quick. He is a LeMans champion, Tony, for Porsche.
He is.
And I think he needed a little more seasoning. He was kind of thrown into F1. I would have loved to see what he could have done if he had come to IndyCar, because he had a contract with Ganassi. Ed Jones ended up taking that car for 1 year, and now it belongs to Felix Rosenqvist. But Brandon Hartley almost raced in the States before getting called up from Red Bull. Anyway, he was on the top step of the podium at Fuji in Japan. The 8 car beat the 7 car, and I think everyone knew that was going to happen because now there's a success handicap. So when you win the previous race, you have to carry extra weight. Trying to mix things up here. There was still a significant gap of at least 1 lap from the top 2 to the third place Rebellion being driven by Bruno Senna along with Gustavo Menezes. That's a tricky one to read off the top of your head there. And Norman Nato. They rounded out the podium, and actually 4th overall was an LMP2 car 10 laps back from the race leaders. That was a feel-good story. It was Team Nederland taking their first ever win with their all-Dutch driver lineup featuring newly crowned F2 champion Nick de Vries, former F1 driver Guido van der Garde, and Frits van Aert. They finished 4th overall. That's a dream come true for them. Very strong run in the LMP2 class. And in GT, it was also a dream weekend for Aston Martin. They won both the GT Pro and Amateur classes. And, Tony, that new generation of Vantage with that Dayglow paint, oh, my God, it looks awesome.
Yeah.
That's a real... When that car goes by, it arrests all of your senses. It is stunning to look at and to listen to, and you can feel it when it goes by. I love race cars like that.
Yeah, good stuff. I love the Aston Martin.
IndyCar, they were on track at Barber last week. They got to try out their new visor and their driver protection windscreen system, and they got to try it out in the rain with Ryan Hunter-Reay and Simon Pagenaud. Seems like it's clearing all the hurdles. The last little niggle to work out is with driver cooling and airflow to the driver's helmets. You're used to all those helmets are designed to distribute air to the driver to keep him cool. That's not necessarily happening with the windscreen just yet, but they do have several months to figure that out, and they are very clever people over there at Red Bull Technologies, so I'm sure they'll come up with something that everyone can agree to before we hit the streets of St. Petersburg next March. Also in IndyCar, McLaren has informed Connor Daly that he is no longer in consideration for that seat.
That's a shame.
It would have been really cool to see him partner with James Hinchcliffe next year, but we also know it won't be Marcus Ericsson either. He has just signed with Chip Ganassi Racing in
winners.
A third car. He's got a monopoly on Swedish drivers right now to partner with Felix Rosenqvist. Rumors are now also starting to circulate that our Indy Lights champion, Ollie Askew, is in line for a 4th seat at Ganassi if funding can be found. We know they already have pit crews because Ganassi is winding down their Ford Factory GT program. He's already got 2 teams here employed in the States. He's trying to keep everybody employed and move them over to their IndyCar team. So kudos to Chip for thinking of all the people who've put their heart and soul and blood, sweat, and tears into that Ford GT program.
Ollie, get your Askews here.
Is that Schoolhouse Rock?
I think it is.
Adverbs?
Yeah, lolly, get your adverbs.
That's pretty good.
It just came right off the top of my head. Hey, do you feel like, because I didn't see it.
It's almost as good as your Takuma Masato.
Takuma Masato. Do you think this is going to mean the end of Marcus Ericsson as a test driver and that relief driver for Alpha? I got to think it does.
I do think so.
It wasn't in any of the release, but I had to expect that to be the case.
And especially since he ended up flying all the way to Belgium for nothing. I know SPM probably wasn't thrilled, but I can't imagine the likes of Chip Ganassi allowing one of his drivers to have an out clause like that.
No.
IMSA, their finale is on Saturday. Penske Acura leads the standings, heading to Petite Le Mans over the Whelen Cadillac by 12 markers. GTLM, Porsche currently 1-2 in points, with Bamber and Vantor leading their team car by 14 points. And in GTD, it's all but locked up, with Farnbacher and Hindman in their Acura leading the plaid Porsche, which, by the way, the plaid Porsche is going to have a new look. It's actually going to be blue plaid this weekend instead of red. So instead of that poutine livery they've had, it's going to look like Sir Jackie's pants.
Yeah, and they're going to have that beautiful Coca-Cola livery on one of the Porsches as well. That's going to be sweet.
This IMSA 50th stuff has been fantastic all season. There's been great paint schemes from the past hitting the track all season long.
And I think I read that one of the Action Express cars was actually going to be parked for next year. I can't remember if it's the 5 or the 31. I think it's the 5 or the 31. It's Felipe Albuquerque's because he's going to join the other car on some of the longer races.
Correct. So what they've been saying is that Action Express will likely go to a single-car effort. They have been, in this era of sports car racing, a two-car effort at every single race they have entered. They currently field the number 31 Wheeling Cadillac, driven by Pippo Durrani and Felipe Nasr, and the number 5 Mustang Sampling Cadillac with Felipe Albuquerque and Joao Barbosa. That is the car that is in jeopardy.
Yeah.
They have retained Albuquerque, at least for the Enduros, to plug into the Wheeling Cadillac. If they do go to one car, that means this weekend could be the swan song for two-time series champion Eric Curran. Now, I spoke with him earlier this year at Barber when he was racing in a Lamborghini Super Trofeo. He had stepped out of the car and became the endurance driver after winning a couple championships with Dane Cameron for the Wheeling Corvette and Cadillac teams over the years. Eric said that he had been hoping to wind down his racing career. He's actually working on building a racetrack out in the Los Angeles area, a proper road course in Southern California.
Why in the world would you want to do that?
It's an area starved for it. Where are you going to go? All the way up to Willow Spring? All the way up to Laguna Seca? I mean, Southern California.
I guess because our company's in the racetrack business, I don't know that building new ones is a great idea. But
I'm
not
sure if it's just a track day track or if it's going to be like a proper grandstand. Maybe
if you did one to where people could, like you said, a track day track like they have those country clubs.
He'd probably make his money back just filming car commercials out there near L.A.
True.
So I know, Eric, that's one of the projects he's working on. So this could be the last chance to go see Eric Curran race. There is hope that they can get enough funding to run both cars next year, but they are going to keep Felipe on the roster. So we'll keep an eye on that. Lots of free agents going into next year. Now that we can add Joao Barbosa to that list, we know Colin Brown will be available because the Nissan DPI program is winding down. That team owned by John Bennett. So Colin, one of the most sought-after talents on this side of the pond.
Yeah, I would think so.
Also, all of the Ford GT drivers. As far as I know, I don't think any of them are committed to anything for next year. Speaking of, this will be a fond farewell to the Ford GT. It is one of my favorite race cars of all time, not just this modern era. I have actually made trips to racetracks just to see that car a couple more times. Specifically, VIR this summer was like, man, I really want to see that Ford go tearing through these corners one last time. So if you get a chance, please head to Road Atlanta this weekend, or at least check it out on TV. There is a chance that it could be run as a non-factory team in the future as a customer car, kind of like, that Viper hung on for years after Dodge pulled out of sports car racing. So it could be a situation like that. But the Ford factory program, it came, it saw, it conquered, it did exactly what it said it was going to do, show up 50 years after it won 4 straight Le Mans and ran for 4 years, won a lot of the biggest races in the world, won the Rolex 24. It won Le Mans in its return in 2016. I know because I was there on my honeymoon. I have the best wife. That car is an icon. So I'll be very sad to see it go this weekend.
I know, speaking of VIR, the SCCA runoffs this weekend, so that's pretty cool for the amateur drivers.
Absolutely.
Great track for that.
Yeah, I know they moved that event around.
For the longest time when we raced, it was at Road Atlanta. Then they started moving it to Topeka, and then it's kind of bounced around. It was at, I think, Sonoma, and then it was out at Laguna Seca. I don't think it was ever Road America. They run the June sprints there. I don't remember a runoff there.
My buddy Mark won.
Did they do the runoff there?
He won the 50th SCCA runoff because they let a bunch of past champions in. So he dusted off his old Acura. I think it was the FP class.
There you go.
I remember watching it online. He would going through the last couple corners there through Bill Mitchell. You could see him get like one of the rear wheels would come off the ground on the front wheel drive cars. It was awesome to watch.
Nice, and just a note on Viper staying in so long on the IMSA side. That was basically because Ben Keating owned the world's largest Viper dealership in that Viper Connect, I think it was, in Texas. We had him on the old sports car podcast, and what a cool guy he is. Earlier this year, thought he had a Le Mans win.
In the Ford GT,
yeah.
no less.
Interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, it all comes full circle.
Yeah, it does.
I like that Ben Keating fellow. One other note to touch on before we sign off. The Bathurst 1000 is this weekend. It is the granddaddy of Australian supercars and, dare I say, touring cars anywhere in the world. I'll put this up against any race. This track is on par with the Nürburgring Nordschleife in terms of difficulty and just daunting presence. Mount Panorama, it is known simply in Australia as the mountain.
Yep.
I can't wait to watch this. This is what I'll be doing all day Monday when I get home from Talladega.
Where can we watch this, Eric?
We actually...
Are we going to have to dive into the YouTubes and look for something, or...
You may have to poke around for a stream. I actually bought the app. The app, I think, is only, I may be wrong on this, but I think it's only like $40 for the year, and you get the entire series unabridged. You can watch all the races that they have. I usually get to watch maybe 4 or 5 per year, and then I make a habit of watching all, 9 hours of coverage from Mount Panorama. It's probably the most exciting thing happening in motorsports in the month of October every year. It is truly a race to behold. If you haven't seen it before, please seek it out. Some of the storylines going in there. Scotty McLaughlin is trying to get his first win at the mountain in the middle of the best season anyone has ever had in the history of supercars. His co-driver will be the Frenchman and LeMans veteran Alexander Prema. Other notable pairings, Craig Lowndes will be with Jamie Whincup in the 888. Garth Tander is back. He'll be with the other Red Bull with Shane Van Gisbergen. And also, don't forget that wild card entry for Walkinshaw Andretti with Alexander Rosky.
Who?
Alexander Rusky. Yeah, he's Russian now.
Nice.
I like that, yeah. Alex Rossi and old Jimmy Hinchcliffe's, our favorite Canadian, making the trip down under. So that should be a fantastic event. I can't wait to watch that one.
Hinchtown Hammerdown.
We got our flat 12 ready to go. We're saving one for Monday.
There you go. Hey, thanks for that Morse code report. Eric, before we let you go, I want to give you some kudos, some props.
What'd I do?
Well, because it was a podcast ago that you mentioned the whole Vettel and Leclerc thing. Is this the comings of Multi-22? And you went into the whole thing of what Multi-21 was. 3 days later, all of the big platforms that cover Formula One were doing stories on, could this be another recreation of Multi-21, and explain what it is? We were 3 days. I double-checked and went back and checked all the Formula One video sites, audio sites, writing sites to see if anybody had it when we released it. They may have been thinking it, but it took them 3 days to do it. I'm not saying they're listening to our podcast because the numbers don't show that they are.
I don't think they are.
But you were on top of your game with that one.
I appreciate the props there. And to be fair, I think we were talking about it watching the race on Sunday when that was going down. I know I was saying it with the people I was watching, and I believe, I couldn't remember if it was Paul DeResta who was filling in for Brundle or if it was Crofty had made a comment. It might have even been Ted Kravitz, just not necessarily going into the weeds, but just mentioning, oh, this is Multi-21 all over. I recall saying something similar about the time they did. I mean, if you've watched Sebastian Vettel through the years, you know he's got that dark side. So, yeah, just interesting to draw parallels to the young rising world champion versus the state of Sebastian Vettel that we've seen over the last couple of years. See, it's good to see that at least he's still got the fire.
Yeah, we're rarely first on this side of the pond with
I'll take it.
F1 breakdown, but I felt I'm going to give us props there. I thought we kind of did it. Well, it's going to be a fantastic weekend of racing. Hopefully we'll get the Formula One race. Again, looks like Friday, late Friday, that Super Typhoon coming in, bothering the track probably early into the morning on Saturday, and hopefully clearing out by Saturday night. Again, what that does to the racetrack or the infrastructure around, we don't know. Hopefully it will miss it. Hopefully Japan will deal really well with this and they won't have any issues, and we'll get Formula One racing. If not, we'll keep you up to date on when it runs. I don't know their policy.
Territory.
Would it run on a Monday morning like we do? You got everybody over there, or what do they do? I don't know.
Well, you know what? We don't really know what's normal right now because we have new owners.
Yeah.
Everything's kind of different in the last couple of years since the age of Bernie has ended. So just because it used to be done one way doesn't necessarily mean that's how it's going to be handled this weekend. So we'll be keeping an eye on the one eye on the TV, one eye on the radar.
Well, however it works out, you can count on the American Racing Snobs to bring you all the action from Japan, from Australia, from Petite, LeMans, Atlanta. We will have it all. For Eric Morris, I'm Tony Rizzuti. Talk to you next time on another edition of American Racing Snobs.